The Spanish Grand Prix has revealed the first major upgrades for the majority of the Formula One teams, and it's led to a small change in the order. So who's winning the development race of 2022 so far? Let's have a look. My name's Andy, and this is Behind the Drive. One of the rule changes of 2022 has been that teams are now obliged to reveal all of their changes and upgrades that they bring to each circuit in advance. This means that we have more insight than ever before into these changes and can see where the teams are focusing their limited development efforts. A carbon copy. The first topic we have to discuss is the fact that the new Aston Martin B-Spec car looks like a carbon copy of the Red Bull design that was only revealed at the tests earlier this year. It would be impossible for the Aston Martin team to have copied it, designed the parts needed, and then created them so quickly. So it implies that there could have been something going on behind the scenes. Various personnel have moved across from Red Bull to Aston Martin in the last few months, including Dan Fallows, who is now the technical director for that team. Red Bull themselves were approached by the FIA before the weekend to ask for those that have left the team recently in case there was any suspicious actions. But the investigation was closed after Aston Martin provided proof that this concept was in the works since November last year. And certainly in the case of Fallows, his move was announced in June last year and he joined the Silverstone-based team in April of this year, so it's unlikely that anything could have come from him given the car has changed so much. This timeline of the investigation of this B-Spec car in November makes sense, given the fundamental changes to the layout of the car, including the cooling system. These significant modifications couldn't possibly be completed in such a short time frame if they'd just been using images of their rival's car in efforts to reverse engineer it. However, some of the bodywork could have certainly been inspired by one of the strongest teams on the grid right now as they look to improve their design further before bringing it to this latest race. The problem I have with this though is the fact that this team has done this before. Back in 2020, the so-called Tracing Point car was revealed and it was identical to the 2019 Mercedes. They claimed that the car was based on images of the Mercedes car from the previous season. This was more plausible given they had significantly more time to copy their rivals and design their own car. But to have done a similar thing again and to fundamentally copy a rival team is not really part of the ethics of Formula One. What happened to the Force India team that were able to punch well above their weight and maximise their limited resources each year? It feels like there could be a new copying culture that's starting to become the norm there, and I don't think it's good for the sport. It could of course turn out that the team just happened to independently come up with a similar design idea and concept, and given the team is growing significantly, it could have been a design that they came up with themselves. But with that prior activity of 2020, it just feels like something is suspicious about it. As for the performance on track, it seems like it's taking the team a little while to get the new car working. This makes sense as it was a fundamental new concept and they were just setting it up for the first time. And instead of the 6 full days of running like they had at the start of the season, they had just 3 short practice sessions to get the setup in the right place for qualifying. Both Aston Martin drivers went out in Q1, with both drivers not getting into the points-paying positions either through the Grand Prix. So yes, it will take time for them to unlock the performance. Time will tell on whether it was the right way to go. But this change could set them up for success or failure in the long run this season and maybe propel them back up into the midfield positions. It'll be interesting to see what happens next though as Red Bull opens an investigation. If it does emerge that there's been some foul play, then there could be some serious repercussions. Before we take a look at Mercedes next, I want to thank you all for the support on the channel recently. I'm still aiming for 50,000 subscribers by the summer break, so if you're enjoying the videos then please do consider hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Thanks. A Mercedes revival. The Mercedes team also brought significant upgrades to their car before the Spanish Grand Prix. These were predominantly and understandably focused on the team's porpoising problems, as they look to reduce the impact of this bouncing and ensure that their limiting factor is not just the driver's pain threshold, but actually is closer to what their car can achieve. To do this, they bought a new floor edge, which looks like it could be adjustable depending on each circuit to control how much of the floor is sealed. This would mean that the team would have more control to optimise the setup of the car for each circuit to control the porpoising. From the early signs on Friday, it looked like the team had made some strong progress, with the pair finishing second and third in FP2 and looking strong on the long run pace. There was also a noticeable reduction in the porpoising down the straights, suggesting that the upgrades were working. In qualifying, the gap between them and the two teams ahead was still evident, with Russell ending up over 6 tenths behind Leclerc on pole. but it did feel like there was potential in the car's race pace. On Sunday, the Mercedes team was certainly more competitive relative to the cars ahead of them, and it seemed like both Russell and Hamilton had more confidence in their car. Russell showed his abilities in defending against Verstappen and Perez throughout the majority of the race and trusted his car throughout. And Hamilton had an awesome drive to go right from the back of the grid with a puncher all the way back to 5th position. A great drive, and one that surely would have been impossible if the car's porpoising problems had persisted. So there was more confidence from Mercedes, and the upgrades to the floor have surely helped them significantly. I think Mercedes have been really impressive to be able to identify and solve their problems so quickly. They do have a long way to go to recover the remaining gap to Ferrari and Red Bull, but there was a lot more talk this weekend of Mercedes becoming a challenger, and I think we can be confident that they will get there this year. Perhaps I have some wishful thinking to have 3 teams at the front competing for race victories, as that gap was still significant. But there was cause to be optimistic if you're a Mercedes fan after the race in Barcelona. The losers. This year, with the new regulations combined with the budget restrictions, it's even more critical that the teams are able to bring upgrades to the car to keep their position in the pecking order. But the only team that failed to bring upgrades at the Spanish Grand Prix was Haas. The American team had a strong start to the season, with Kevin Magnussen maximising the car and scoring points on 3 occasions. However, there would always be a risk that the team would be unable to keep themselves in the fight at the front with the resources available to them. And it's starting to look like this could well be the case. Gunther Steiner has said that the team will bring upgrades in the next few races, but this is way behind their rivals. It raises the question of why the Haas team are behind. We know that they have a different setup, with factories in the UK and Italy producing parts. We also know that a lot of the production is outsourced to Dallara. But I think that a cause for concern was Mick Schumacher's crash in Jeddah. That car was a write-off, and would certainly have needed to be rebuilt from the ground up. This process would have surely taken resources away from the development of new parts, as the team likely has the same people producing the smaller parts for the wind tunnel and then the full car. So this could have slowed them down when it comes to bringing developments to their car this season. As for the performance on track, well, the Haas car has tended to be better at some races more than others in 2022, and the same was true in Barcelona, as they both managed to get through to Q3. Perhaps this proves that the upgrades aren't everything when it comes to achieving results in Formula 1. As we saw with Aston Martin in Spain, it takes time to unlock performance from potential upgrades, so sometimes sticking with what you know and getting the setup in the right place is all you need. But at the same time, the Haas cars dropped back in the race, with Magnussen losing out as a result of the collision with Hamilton, and Schumacher failing to maintain the pace through the Grand Prix and finishing down in 14th. So while Haas had a poor race in general, it wasn't a terrible weekend for them. But as the other teams start to get to grips with their new upgrades, they could well fall behind if they don't start to improve their car as well. Another team on the grid that bought significant upgrades for Spain was McLaren, a team that has already shown significant improvement so far in 2022. The team bought a whopping 10 upgrades to Spain, the most of any team. Like Haas, the McLaren car is one that certainly has stronger circuits than others, but the Barcelona circuit was one that it looked strong at in the first test of the year. So with 10 upgrades and promising form at the circuit coming into the weekend, to have just one car make it through to Q3 and to only get one car in the points, I would argue is a bit disappointing. Now, it must be said that the McLaren car has tended to struggle in hot conditions so far this season, and they have struggled with the front brake temperatures early on in the year. So the fact that the race was conducted in 36-degree heat compared to the cooler conditions of testing may explain the gap in performance. But even so, I expect the McLaren team would have been hoping for more with their 10 upgrades in Spain. As with the rest of the teams, there's definitely scope for these upgrades to come good over the next few races as they start to gather more data on how to get the most from them. So time will tell on whether these upgrades push the McLaren team back to the front of the midfield on a regular basis. Who do you think the biggest winners are when it comes to the development race? Let me know in the comments, and if you want to know which of the drivers are performing the best in these new cars this year, then watch this video next.